Moving now to the last presentation by Mahyar Arefi. Mahyar Arefi has taught at the University of Texas at Arlington for 4 and at the University of Cincinnati for 16 years. He also co-edits Urban Design International. In addition to his affiliations with international institutions of higher education, including the UAE, Turkey, and Sweden, he served as a Fulbright Scholar in Turkey and peer-reviewed for the Fulbright and the Global Innovation Initiative grant. Dr. Arefi has published extensively in academic journals, including Planning, Education and Research, Town Planning Review, Journal of Urban Design, Cities, Cityscape, Planning Theory and Practice, Planning Practice and Research, Social Semiotics, and specializes in the areas of urban design theory, practice, and pedagogy, place and placemaking, community and international development, and informal settlements. He published his book, Asset-Based Approaches to Community Development, with the UN Habitat in 2008, and his recent book includes Learning from Informal Settlements in Iran, Models, Policies, and Processes, and a co-edited volume, the Palgrave Handbook of Bottom-Up Urbanism. His other book, Deconstructing Placemaking, Needs, Assets, and Opportunities, was the recipient of 2 international awards in 2015 and 2019. He currently has a book on formal-informal urban design dichotomy under contract with Manchester University Press. Mahyar Arefi, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Francesco. And it's great to be here. And I'm sorry that I don't know why my screen didn't work, but it's a great pleasure to be here. And I have to actually make a confession. My presentation is not really that much about placemaking, and but this is a great panel. And as I was listening to all the presentations, I think there are a lot of things that are common in sort of the picture that I'm trying to depict here. I know today Matthew talked about cities as diverse places, and if I remember correctly, Sienna talked about, that everybody's job is to create places, not just the government. And Pablo talked about uncertainty. So I think there's a little bit of all of these in my presentation too. And I tell you, as Nuno was introducing me just a minute ago, he mentioned that I was working on a book on formal and informal urban design, which has been sort of my forte for the last few years. And I was really enjoying doing that. And I have a book in the just forthcoming. But as I was doing that, and for this particular panel, I stumbled into something that I thought is probably more interesting than just focusing on the binary distinction. So if you see in the slide that you're just looking at right now, I was using a heuristic research method, abductive. As you know, it's like forcing yourself to really summarize or try to explain or define a very complex concept in just a few categories. And that's exactly what I was doing. I've been being an urban designer and architect for many years. So I was really enjoying doing this research, and I was trying to force myself to bring these really, really highly complex concepts into just a few categories. And as you can see in the first slide to the diagram that I was dealing with was really, I was looking at describing a formal urban design at the bottom of the diagram, as you can see, with 3 arrows: aesthetics, regulation, and design. Obviously, we can all debate about whether these 3 categories are really relevant or exactly everybody thinks this way. We can debate all we want, but I was pretty convinced that, yeah, you can pretty much summarize or reduce, if you will, formal urban design, a formal urban design process into, design, obviously, regulations and codes and stuff like that. And of course, aesthetics. And then the reverse side of that, I was looking at informal and trying to sort of condense that into 3 categories. And I came up with again, being part of that book that I'm writing, well, you know, informal urban design doesn't really pretty much focus on design per se, just like formal urban designers do, but they focus on adaptation. The most important thing for an informal settlement is to adapt to a particular circumstance, environmentally, culturally, socially, whatnot. And then the regulation, at least the formal aspect of regulation, doesn't pretty much apply to informal settlements or informal sectors, but they have the information, if you will. I mean, they have their own regulations informally, but you can't really call them formal regulations. So I would like to more think of what's going on, the way they communicate in terms of information exchanges. And finally, informal, you know, settlements don't pretty much focus on, you know, the aesthetics of things as the formal urban designers do, but they focus on, or they rely mostly on their own assets or resources. You know, you can talk about their social networks, you can talk about their bonding and bridging capital and all that kind of stuff. So as I was really contemplating and thinking about these comparisons between the formal and the informal, it dawned on me that, first of all, as you can see in this diagram, you know, when we discuss all the characteristics of an informal settlement, we're talking about a broader bandwidth. In other words, adaptation as a concept is much broader, in my opinion, than just, you know, design as in creating something, you know, out of nothing. Or, for example, information is much broader than regulation, and the same way assets and resources are broader than aesthetics. So anyway, so I was kind of getting a kick out of this, and I was really looking at this and comparing the formal and the informal, namely the zone in this diagram that you see at the top with the bottom. Then I realized that, you know, in this diagram that I realized that there are two unidentified zones or territories. And I said, wait a minute, what am I really up to? So you can see there are two question marks at the right and the left-hand side of this diagram, which actually, I was thinking about this for a bit because I thought it was fascinating. I mean, I thought I was stumbling into something I was not ready. I was ready for the binary, the distinction between the formal and informal. And then I all of a sudden realized that there are two sort of unidentified territories. Now, again, based on the formal and based on the heuristic abductive research methods, then I forced myself to follow what the book tells us. You know, you try to probably find a third characteristic, just like the other two themes that I was telling you about, the formal and informal. And I defined the formal with three categories of aesthetics, regulation, and design, and the informal with adaptation, information, and assets. Now here, if you look at the two unidentified territories, I already had two words for them. So I had adaptation and aesthetics for the third category, or the third unidentified territory, and I had assets and design for the other side of this diagram. So I had to come up with a word, abductively or heuristic if you want. And I was thinking about this, and Francesco, if you go to the next slide, then I came up with this, you know, and came up with a kind of a long axis with two words on either end of it, nature and culture. And when I looked at this, it was fascinating because I was not ready for this, but I was looking at something that sounded pretty new to me. And that's why in the title of my presentation, I called them Strange Bedfellows, because I was really looking at least as far as I was concerned, I was looking at formal and informal, pretty typical conventional type research. But then when I looked at these two or three newcomers, you know, nature, aesthetics, and adaptation on the one hand, and then design, culture, and assets, then I tried to find a name for them. And when I was thinking a little longer, I came up with, obviously, you know, biomimicry and DIY. And you know, again, going by the book, if you look at the abductive heuristic type research method, if you really come up with something, you kind of have to go back and forth from your theory to your data to literature review and see, you know, whether you can concur or confirm what you think you've done. And then if it confirms, then right on. If not, then, you know, it's a futile exercise. Maybe you're onto nothing. And as I was, you know, delving deeper into this, I realized, no, it does make sense, but I'm not ready really to share with you at this point, you know, how all of these four classes of thinking or characteristics under four different rubrics kind of go together. But as I was listening to all your presentations, I think I'm kind of saying the same thing, but maybe in a kind of a theoretical level. Because actually, you know, when, for example, Pablo was talking about uncertainty, designing disorders, or again, Sienna was talking about, you know, it's not, we don't have just one type of institution to try to create all the places. Or as Matthew was talking about, you know, cities are diverse places for all the people. I guess I'm saying the same thing, but at the theoretical level, saying that, you know, urban design is not all about formal and informal. It's not about all these binaries. It's much more diverse, and it is much more variegated than what we think it is. And again, and I hope that, you know, what I'm saying probably, hopefully makes some sense, because I'm not saying this is not an exhaustive list. We're not talking about just four schools of thought. Obviously, there are more, but because of my constellations, if you will, of these categories here, then I thought at least, you know, well, four is probably better than two. It's not just a, you know, black and white kind of a situation. It's a shades of gray and things like that. So when I put these names, just to test myself, I try to really actually try to put all these three words, the newcomers, if you will, the DIY part and the biomimicry part, into just two new sentences, so that I can, at least for my own purposes, I can guarantee, or I can actually confirm that what I'm saying with these words actually under biomimicry or under DIY actually makes sense. So Francesco, if you go to the next slide, I would like to read the sentence for you. So this is biomimicry. At least this is my, you know, version of explaining it. Explores urban design methods that, instead of adding and increasing waste, energy use, and greenhouse emissions to nature, adapts to and nurtures it, gives back to it, and looks attractive. So the words that I have actually bolded here, you know, nature, adaptation, and attractiveness or aesthetics, are exactly the three words that were kind of coming up in the previous diagram. So I thought, yeah, it kind of makes sense. I mean, if you delve deeper into biomimicry, biomimicry is really trying to find design methods with all the problems that we have with, you know, the global warming and everything, and the climate change and everything like that. So we have to be careful. We have to think about nature. We have to imitate nature. But and architects are really doing a wonderful job as they're practicing. We have biophilic cities, so it's not just at the level of architecture, it's actually at the level of urban design too. So I thought, yeah, this part of it actually makes sense. And if Francesco goes to the next slide, then this is the DIY part of it, which is, it reflects, you know, DIY, do it yourself, reflects cultural values materialized in altruistic, selfless, but enthusiastic, you know, collective endeavors where official planning and design apparatus fall short. Again, this is kind of like what all you guys were talking about when we were talking about uncertainty, when Matthew was talking about publicization of private space. You know, all the things that governments, whether by design or not, they kind of fall short of. This is where the other parts of the society and the community have to pick up. So in a sense, I think I am fully, you know, consistent and in tune with what the panel, our panel, was talking about, but maybe in a different level. In fact, this is, you know, I'm sharing this with you because it's just unfolding very recently. But I'm hoping that in the in the future, in the next few months, I can take this research to the next level. Kind of looking at different case studies. Maybe I can work with some of the stuff that you were talking about, because I really think that our cities, whether they're in Asia or the rest of the world, they are diverse. And so we are really dealing with constellations of design methods, constellations of publicness, privateness. It's not just formal and informal anymore. It's not just a top-down approach. And that is why if Francesco goes to the next slide, I was kind of doodling and playing. I don't know if you can see these categories because they're small. As soon as I sort of delved into these four categories, the DIY, formal, informal, and biomimicry, then I started looking at the very few sort of categorizations under each theme. And some of them are bottom up, like DIY is totally bottom up. It's democratic, and as I've said, it's kind of selfless, it's self-reflective. It's small scale mostly. It's low quality in terms of they're not high quality or high tech as compared to formal, and they're based on local knowledge, civic minded. But if you look at formal, it's kind of like maybe somewhat polar opposite to that. It's top down, it's small, too large, it's high quality generally, it's expert knowledge, it's mostly designers, people are educated with it, and the purpose is like Good City 4. And if you go to the other bottom two categories, like the biomimicry part, again, is top down, is large scale, high quality, expert knowledge, and ecologically sort of savvy and giving that formal, precedence to that. And lastly, for the informal, obviously, again, it's bottom up, it's informal approach to design. It's local knowledge, it's small to large scale, low quality, but it has on the plus side of it, empowerment, social justice, and equality. So, this is where I want to leave you guys with. Again, I think even though my specific presentation was not on placemaking per se, but I thought after I heard the presentation, I thought, I'm on the same level, at least as far as the theories of it are concerned. And I hope that, like I said, in the next level, take these four schools of thought as they stand, to the next level, and with having more case studies and hopefully better pictures and not just diagrams and kind of boring presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mahyar. So it's trying to read the phenomenon as it's happening and try to basically describe what many of us are doing and thinking about, but sometimes we don't really have a big picture. It's something that also helps us to empower new modes of practice in this area of urban design. So thanks a lot for your presentation.